Welcome to LFN News, a production of LFN Media, bringing you the latest in celebrity news, with specific analysis to keep you in the know of what is going on around you. When the vendetta by the government against R. Kelly that has since seen his music muted, him dropped by his record label Sony, him losing his fortune, and resultantly being sentenced to 30 years in prison began, it all seemed like all hell had broken loose on the RnB King, and hopes of him ever smelling freedom ever again seemed really slim. But ever since Jenifer Bonjean came into the picture, hope for R. Kelly, his supports and fans has consistently been the order of the day, after she proved that irrespective of all the power and influence the government possesses, they too can be beaten at their own game. Through tactful strategies, that can only come from a wealth of experience dealing with similar, far-reaching charges, merely intended to dethrone personalities that have commanded a fair level of influence in the country, Bonjean has continued to give the government a run for their money over time. R. Kelly's most pressing charges were probably the New York charges that prosecutors conveniently imposed, by tactfully bypassing the statute of limitations, through an approach they had barely tested before, charging him with racketeering, a charge often only used to charge corporations and enterprises involved in criminal activities. Falling on an incompetent, inexperienced legal team that was representing R. Kelly at the time, the rather unique approach shuttered R. Kelly's defense and left the defense team disorganized like a park of hungry hyenas circling around a lion's kill. But now, by the look of things, one wouldn't be surprised if R. Kelly actually ended up acquitted on all the charges against him, walking home a free man in no longer than a year. Firstly, his Cook County charges, that were shelved after they were overshadowed by the two state charges in New York and Chicago, are inevitably going to be dropped by Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx, who just recently got her last lifeline after she sought more time to allegedly go through the transcripts of the two state trials that were concluded. Although prosecution was accorded a whole 30 days to come up with a decision on whether they would be going to trial or dropping the charges altogether, it's inevitable that they will eventually have to just drop the charges, as moving forward with them would immediately mean an inevitable acquittal, a situation no prosecutor ever wants to find themselves in. It is actually believed that the 30-day extension was just sought to allow Kim Foxx and team time to strategize on how to prepare the solicited alleged victims, whose hopes they had greatly raised prior to the glaring facts that now call for acquittal as the next best move from the government. More so, moving on with the charges would present yet another more complex risk of double jeopardy, given that some of the alleged victims in the indictments have actually testified in the concluded state trials of New York and Chicago. Yet another justification of acquittal is the fact that, being lighter charges, the Cook County charges are unlikely to earn Kelly a heavier sentence than in the two state charges, and would therefore be regarded as a deliberate waste of public resources, moving forward with the trial. Now, with the Cook County charges aside, the only verdict that originally seemed rather solid against R. Kelly was the 2019 New York guilty verdict that resultantly saw Kelly sentenced to a hefty 30 years in prison, even way more than what prosecution had demanded, by a largely prejudicial judge that had actually watched the infamous Surviving R. Kelly documentary series. Although a formal intention to appeal had been already submitted, even way ahead of the Chicago trial, the Chicago trial itself single-handedly discredited a lot about the New York verdict, deeply worrying prosecution. From the discrediting of the Surviving R. Kelly documentary series by the prosecution witnesses themselves, that had actually participated in the docuseries, upon which most of the New York trial testimonies were hinged, to the acquittal of R. Kelly's co-defendants, Daryl McDavid and Milton June Brown, which openly discredited the allegations that R. Kelly actually ran an enterprise. Now, it is more eminent than ever that the New York verdict actually won't hold, given the revelations from the Chicago trial. The government will definitely regret having used the far-reaching charges against R. Kelly, which could now see him walk free following a successful appeal that is expected anytime soon. Just recently, R. Kelly's lead defense attorney Jenifer Bonjean gave the government yet another scare when he challenged all 6 counts of which R. Kelly was found guilty in the Chicago trial that was concluded more than 3 months ago. Having won on 7 of the 13 counts against him in the indictment, resulting into a mixed verdict, it seemed as though the 6 counts, including 3 CP charges and 3 of allegedly enticing minors, were rather solid, but they all were actually appealable as per Bonjean's own assessment right after the mixed verdict. Now, the Queen of Technicalities just recently filed 2 separate motions in Chicago's federal court last week seeking a new trial, or a complete reversal of his prior convictions resulting from a largely unfair trial in Chicago that concluded more than 3 months ago. Bonjean made a request to Leinenweber for a judgment of acquittal due to several technicalities cited by the R. Kelly defense team in the filing. Cited in the filing is the fact that prosecutors did not provide any proof that the alleged tape of Kelly allegedly abusing an alleged victim, that was referred to by a pseudonym Jane, was actually made for the purpose of producing CP. This, according to Bonjean, was a critical aspect of the case that needed to be proved beyond doubt, but the prosecution supposedly made no effort to prove the same, thus rendering the charges unwarranted. The filing also argued that there was insufficient evidence that the alleged tape had ever crossed state lines, which prosecutors were similarly required to prove in court. The same motion also argued that the prosecution team failed to prove that Kelly had indeed coerced girls to indulge with him, a basis for 3 of the counts against him. Nowhere in the court transcripts do we see any form of coercion described by any of the alleged victims in the trial. Instead, vividly narrated is the pressure imposed on the alleged victims to create intimate relationships with the RnB King, such as the description of the same Jane, who described how her own auntie pressured her to sit on R. Kelly's laps and ask him to be her godfather. In the second motion, Bonjean and her team leveraged the technicality of misinformation by Dr. Darrell, a prosecution expert witness, who intentionally misstated to the jury how much the government paid him for his testimony. He allegedly told jurors that the government paid him $250 per hour for his work, but Bonjean claimed that his contract was for $450 per hour. And allegedly, an invoice also showed that Turner billed the government for 6.5 hours of trial preparation, while he went ahead to testify that he worked on the case for only 2 hours. Had the jurors known that Dr. Turner actively misled them, the jurors would likely have rejected his testimony outright, Bonjean wrote. These motions now also shade a shadow of doubt on the sustainability of the Chicago verdict, and its impending sentencing, leaving no solid charge on R. Kelly. R. Kelly's freedom is therefore in clearer sight now, more than ever, and we could just as well see him walk free sooner than we had ever imagined. That's all we had for you today. Please let us know in the comment section below what you think of the fate of the government's vendetta against R. Kelly, now that the acquittals are seemingly inevitable. We value your honest opinion. Thank you for watching LFN News, a production of LFN Media, giving you another view of issues at hand. To get notified whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now and hit the notification icon, and remember to give us your comment on the subject matter below.